Life is short, death is long. Revolution inspires what will become. Now that the Nubian queen has spoken, the kingdom of Kush is once again. I see the smile on the newborn, for they can see what we cannot. Now the children have spoken. The kingdom of God is free again. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Yeah. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Sudan, Nubian queen, right? Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Yeah. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Sudan, Nubian queen, rise. Now that the seeds have been planted, there is no stone we can't remove. Now that Nubia has spoken, the kingdom of Kush is once again. I watched the blind come to sight. And now the mute wants to speak. For Nubia has spoken. The kingdom of God is free again. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Yeah. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Welcome to the kingdom of Kush.
You said
Yeah.
I'm golden. You got to be the boss.
Welcome to the kingdom of Kush. Sudan, Nubian queen, right?
Sudanese diaspora here in London are here to support all women in Sudan and around the world, and supporting our people and making sure lifting us out of this mess that we're in right now.
I'll tell you about the doctor. His name is Bakri. He wanted to protect them. Instead, he was shot then. And then comes Mahjoub, a young man with dreams. And now he's become one. A medical student. A service so prudent. Let me also tell you about a teacher whose lessons we'll never forget. In the hands of an enemy, you must never give up. You must never give up. You must never give up. Ladies, people who stood up, they given a massive hands up. And you will also not give up.
We'll never be divided. Sudan, united. 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 We'll never be divided. Sudan, united.
ونرفع علمنا ونرسل رسالة لأوضح حكومة الليلة المسهرة ماشي سبعة تلي الرمي أشديدي أتكسو أشديدي وقفة وطننا ونرفع علمنا ونرسل رسالة لأوضح حكومة أصحى يناير نقوم on time لننعم صرحنا ونبني بلادنا نعمل وطننا
We demanded freedom, and they gave us freedom all over our streets. Sudan's 30-year winter is almost over, and a new spring is blooming. A spring filled with energy of youth, change, and freedom.
بكرة الشمس تسطع وفي السجن يقرأ يتوحد السودان من بعد ما اتقطع من نمل إلى حرفة نتعمر حرفة نطلع من مرة ونعيش ما مرة من كل ما موجوعة لكل ما مسموعة كل قلب غرس يدانا القسوة يا روعة العمال داخلين على المصنع ماشيين بطريق قدام خطوات متقطعة يا ماشي
Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings for everyone that has joined us. This is an important discussion that we are very privileged to have and host. And today we'll be talking about the Sudanese revolution, reflecting on the role of the youth, the diaspora, the women. And we have some special guests that are going to reflect on their role as Sudanese living within the diaspora and what the Sudanese revolution meant to them. But before we get into the discussion, it's important to talk about the recent loss of life in West Darfur. Darfur has been riddled with conflict from 2003, before that even, and many of the hopes and ambitions of the Sudanese revolution was to bring peace and stability to all of Sudan, including Darfur. Our hearts, thoughts and prayers go out to those that lost their lives, and we pray and hope for long-lasting peace. Now, before we continue, let's introduce ourselves individually, and then we will talk about what the Sudanese revolution meant to each of us and what we was hoping to achieve. So I'll start off. My name is Ahmed Cabello. I am a journalist. I'm from Birmingham, but I'm based in London. And from a young age, my father and my family have been politically active and have told me that one day Sudan will be free, that Sudan would be united, and that there would be hope for the future generations, that they could go back to Sudan and live in relative safety and stability. And I was really hoping that the Sudanese revolution would bring this to all the people of Sudan. Now, let me introduce, or let Haija introduce herself, and then we will work our way around.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hajar. I live in Dublin. I'm currently working in the medical field. I'm a dentist. Similar to Ahmed as well, my parents weren't very politically involved, but we all grew up with a dream that someday we're going to go back to Sudan and we're going to live there and build ourselves and build Sudan with it. So the revolution was extremely important to me in that sense, because it gave me that hope that that dream could come true.
And Haija, before we move on, you gave a very important speech. Do you want to talk about that, and then we'll move on to the other introduction?
In the parliament, yeah. So we had an opportunity to represent ourselves and our voices in the Irish Parliament. It was quite an important time because it was at the time when everyone was speaking about the implications or the involvement of the EU in funding a lot of the Sudanese forces that attacked the sit-in at the time. So to be able to confront them with some evidence and to remind them that there are Sudanese people here and we know what's going on was quite monumental. It felt really, really I felt really powerful. I felt that I was finally doing Sudan justice, because I always felt I was just here and everyone at home was looking at me like, you're so lucky, what are you doing with your influence? And for once I could bring the Sudanese voices to the Irish Parliament. And I think they weren't ready to hear that. So it was quite a invigorating experience. So I'm so lucky to have been able to have that opportunity to voice the opinions of people in Sudan.
MashaAllah. Mohammed.
Thank you, Ahmed. And thanks for the Sudanese Communist Party for giving me this chance to be one of the Culture Forum guests. My name is Mohammed Al-Fatih. I'm a networking engineer, graduated from Glasgow Caledonian University, based in Glasgow. But now I'm staying and living in St Andrews. I'm a member of CP-UKI petition team, been volunteering under the umbrella of the Sudanese Diaspora in the UK. And also I'm a member of the Sudanese community in Glasgow. The first time I actually involved in a civil resistance movement in Sudan was 2013. And that time I had a hope that we are going to make a change and kick the deposed president out of the Republican Palace. But unfortunately, things went wrong and thousands of people injured and about 200 people being killed. So I felt so bad that time and very disappointed. But a few weeks later, I realized that was not the end, and we have to keep fighting again and again until we make it. And from that time, so I kept just working and just in order to change the oppressive and austerity regime in Sudan. So yeah.
Okay. Zainab.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Zainab Majzoub. I'm a student studying Arabic and International Relations at University of St Andrews, but also normally based in Glasgow, like Mohammed. I first got involved in, trying to raise awareness about the uprising when I would hear about the atrocities that were happening through family, but I was shocked to see how little was actually being reported in the mainstream. So I thought it was kind of our role to give voice to that and bring attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the invitation. Name is Ahmed Proni. Based in London, biomed graduate. I came across the Sudanese revolution, and it gave me more than actually I gave. So I learned from it. I found my community. I found a base for me. I've been here for 17 years, so it's nice to finally find a culture or a base to return to when you're away from home.
Shukran. And last but not least, Isra.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Islamia Mohammed. I'm based in Newcastle. I'm currently a pharmacy student. I've been an anti-racism and anti-Islamophobia activist since I was 15 years old, and I became more politically active with the things going on in Sudan after the uprising started. I think it's very important that we speak on this topic because we don't want the people who passed away to die in vain. We want to make sure like what they fought for ends up becoming successful, and that we do see a better Sudan, that we do see a better tomorrow for Sudan. It's been a long fight for many years, and it's all our dream for it to see, you know, people doing better and not struggling how they are right now.
Thank you very much for those introductions. I wanted to ask, it's an open question, anyone's free to answer this, but if there was one thing that you was hoping to see change in Sudan following the toppling of Omar al-Bashir, what was that? And also, did the process of the Sudanese protests and the revolution, did that bring you closer to your Sudanese identity? Okay, I'm gonna ask someone then.
I was gonna say, I definitely felt closer to my Sudanese identity. I didn't think that seeing what would happen would have such an effect on me, as I didn't think of myself as like a patriotic person. But I think it would affect any human to see, like, you know, the demands of the Sudanese people are not something humongous. It's basic human rights that we all deserve. In terms of expectations of what I wanted to see, I think there have been positive steps, especially regarding the role of women or like some women's rights. But as I'm sure you'll talk about in greater detail soon, that's not that doesn't mean overnight everything's going to be perfect. But I think the most important thing for me to see is like a unified direction in terms of change, because, you know, whenever there's like a power vacuum, it provides the opportunity for more corruption, because this isn't the first or probably not going to be the last revolution that Sudan has had. But we always see unsavory types filling that space, and it's about us having a unified message and direction in terms of who takes the lead in the future.
Thank you for that. Ahmed, I saw in that video, you was beating the drum very passionately. So you was, like many of us here, was at the protest. What was you hoping to see change in Sudan? And did it bring you closer to your Sudanese identity?
It did, for sure. Finding who we truly are, because Sudanese people, we have been deceived for 30 years, you know, in terms of division, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of, and Sudan is a tribal based country, so it was manipulated for over 30 years, and people awareness was not in a upper level. It was decreasing years by years. So seeing changes, seeing all of these issues or these problems, that these walls we had in front of our faces disappearing or vanishing with the previous regime gone. Having your right to speak up, you know, you can freely say what you want to say, agree or disagree. In terms of people looking closely to the real issue now, you know, in terms of health, in terms of education, you know, people are discussing serious matters, not ignored. It's not put to the side. So for me, that's what the stage of this revolution is. The revolution has, or the process of the revolution, as I believe, is been going on for years, like since the 80s, since the previous regime have started. And I would like to thank all the previous generation that have been fighting, and till we got to that stage, till we achieved freedom, and you know, and inshallah we'll carry on to see more and more. But I just don't want people's expectation of the revolution a bit higher, or as a revolutionist, I have higher expectation than what human being or resources at the meantime we have in capability in that time. Like the basically my dreams are bigger than than reality, if I could say. But yeah, alhamdulillah, we've reached a peace agreement. So that's one of the demands of the revolution. Inshallah, we'll see the justice for the deceased, for كل الشهداء. May Allah accept them. Inshallah. We have lost life, and everyone fought for the sake of Sudan. If I could say, anyone that we all fight for the same purpose, the benefit of Sudan. So everyone who lost their life for that matter or that purpose, may Allah accept them for Aleen. And yeah, I want to hear your experience, Ahmed, as well. You also went there, so how was it there?
In Sudan?
And that's something I missed, you know, the revolution and Sudan. I haven't been in Sudan since 2011, so it's been a long time. So how is it experiencing it?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Sudan recently. I'm doing a documentary, a 2-part documentary about the Sudanese revolution. If you could put your mics on mute, because I think there's a bit of an echo. Yeah, so I went to Sudan recently to do a 2-part documentary about the Sudanese revolution. And what shocked me was just how much people are struggling. The economic crisis is really, really bad. Inflation is at unbearable levels. The queues for the petrol, for the bread. When I went back, a lot of my family members were struggling, friends, people that I care about in the community. So although I had a lot of hope of what I hope the Sudanese revolution would bring, so far, I know it's a long process and we're only at the beginning of that process. So far, that hasn't materialized. The military still seems to be in charge, or if not in charge, has a disproportionate amount of power, more than they should in a true revolutionary society. But I think it's a long process, and the revolution didn't end when Omar al-Bashir stepped down. And it's a long battle that we all need to continue to fight. But I wanted to speak to some of the sisters here, because as you can imagine, women were very instrumental in the Sudanese revolution. Some put the figure of up to 60% of the protesters being women. Sudan, before Omar al-Bashir, has a strong history of women's movement, of women in politics. So I'll start with Hajar and then I'll ask Isra. as a woman, what did you expect? What did you hope that the Sudanese revolution would bring in terms of women's rights and in terms of for Sudanese women and future generations?
Okay, so that's a really good question. But just before we move on, I just want to address, there's a lot of people in the comments, they're asking as to why we're speaking in English. So بس دار أقول لكم يعني نحن ناس كلنا تربينا برا السودان والعربي بتاعنا ما قوي، وعشان نعبر بشكل يعني كامل على أفكارنا أحسن لنا إنه نتكلم بالعربي. يعني حنحاول إنه نتكلم الإنجليزي بتاعنا ما يكون too complicated عشان الناس تفهم. وبرضه أفتكر إنه دي حاجة من أسباب إنه الشباب اللي هنا ما بحسوا بإنه هن يعني part of a Sudanese community، لأنه حتى لما تجي لحاجات زي دي إنه الزول يتكلم ولا يعبر عن أفكاره، الناس برضه بيقفوا له ونقول لهم والله ده ما حيتكلموا بالعربي بيتكلموا بس بالإنجليزي. يعني معلش، لكن إحنا حنحاول إنه يعني نعبر والكلام برضه يكون واضح للناس اللي بيتكلموا بالعربي والناس اللي بيتكلموا بالإنجليزي. ولو في زول ما فهم حاجة ولا عنده أي أسئلة ممكن يسألنا في الكومنتس ونحن حنرد عليهم. Okay, so to address the role of the women in Sudan. So as we all know, Sudanese women had an enormous role in Sudanese history. They always played such a massive role. So to see that happening again, I can't say I was surprised, but I was impressed that, you know, people were taking note of the role of the women in Sudan. And I suppose that gave me hope in the sense that if people would value our position in changing things, that they would also value our position in, you know, bringing forward new laws and new ways to revolutionize how Sudanese women are seen in society and how much access they have to, you know, roles in politics, roles in education, in different aspects of society. So it was a very hopeful time because Sudanese women were at the forefront and they were the ones who were bringing attention to the Sudanese revolution. So we couldn't be ignored anymore by anyone. And I think that gave me a sense of like hope and power that we could do something and we could change something. Obviously there's a long way to go because the roots of misogyny are so deep in Sudan. So to, you know, try and you know, undo the damage that has been done over the century, it's going to be a long road. But the fact that women now are not going to stay silent and we know our voice and the, you know, how important we are to changing things, I think we can hold them accountable and we can still be at the forefront of change. And I'd also like to ask Isra then what her opinion is, because I know she's quite a strong woman and she has a lot, you know, a voice, and ever since she was young, I want to see what she thinks, you know, how the future for women in Sudan would look like, or if she has anything to add.
Thanks for that. I think that's a really great question when it comes to women's rights in Sudan, and of course the rise of feminism in Sudan. You know, women play such a big role within the uprising, and one of my biggest hopes was for women to gain more rights and to be able to do things that were seen as taboo or frowned upon, such as being within politics. For me personally, I think it's just so important that people understand how, when it comes to feminism, we're not saying, you know, it's about women being better than men or higher than men. It's about just equality between women and men. And when it comes to just gaining respect for women, that's something that's extremely important and is a huge issue right now, that a lot of women are not respected in Sudan. And that's the reason, you know, we feel as women, whenever we go to Sudan, or just women who do live in Sudan, that we're not respected and we're just seen as objects most of the time. So for me personally, I think this is going to be a great time, and I know for a fact that over time, with the uprise of feminism, that women will gain more rights. And, you know, even if I make it my life's mission for that to happen, I think that's something that's definitely going to happen, but it might take some time.
Shukran, thank you. One thing that I noticed, and I wanted to ask Mohammed this, living in a diaspora, it always felt there was a divide between the young and the old. Whenever we go to the parties, young people go this way, old people go that way. But during the protest, it felt like that divide was erased or reduced somewhat, and we united. I wanted to ask Mohammed, what's your thoughts about the way that the young and the older generation came together? And do you think now, 2 years on, we are less divided, or has it just gone back to how it was before the Sudanese revolution? Assalamu alaikum, you're on mute, Mohammed, you're on mute. You have to unmute the microphone.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so for me, I can just like speak in both Arabic and English. I mean, when the revolution happened, like during the Sudanese uprising, because all the people like across Sudan, regardless of their tribe groups or religion background, so they shared the same goal, which is just like changing the regime. So they forgot about anything else. But for me, I can see that after the revolution, like being done successfully, people are like going to be divided again. Also, there's a huge gap like between our generation and like our parents and grandparents like generation. In order to fill that gap, actually, we need to came all together as youth, and we don't have to inherit the bad things from them, like the discriminations, the racism, and all this stuff. And I'm sure 100% as like one united nation, we can do more. So, yeah.
Shukran, thank you for that. One of the most pivotal moments in the Sudanese revolution, or tragic moments, was, for me personally, was the June the 3rd massacre, in which so many people were killed. We don't really know the true number of people killed because rivers were dumped in the body and people were assaulted, and there was all types of atrocities. Now, what I think people in Sudan don't realize is how much it affected the diaspora as well. I could speak from my own personal experience. My mom was telling me how she couldn't get to sleep for many nights, and I was the same, and we knew people there, and I'm sure that experience is mirrored in this group, but also mirrored amongst the diaspora in all different parts of the UK and Ireland. I'll start with Hajra. When the June the 3rd massacre happened, how did that affect you as a Sudanese person? And how did you feel when the people that are seen to be responsible for that massacre seem to still be somewhat in power in Sudan, or close to the corridors of power in Sudan?
One word, and that's helpless. So I didn't know what to do or what I could have done. Or if we had a protest that same day, going out to that protest was going to do anything. All I wanted to do was get on a plane and get everyone on a plane and just go back to Sudan and fight on the ground. So that was the theme, like, of that whole period of time. It was just helplessness. And I think I can speak for a lot of the diaspora here, especially my parents' generation, who obviously they've lived in Sudan. So seeing things like this happening, like we were watching through Facebook Live, people being killed, it was just horrendous. And then not being able to do nothing. And then the internet shut off, so we couldn't even reach anyone back home. We didn't know what was going on or what was happening. So that's how I would describe that time. It was just a lot of helplessness and wanting to do more, but not knowing how to help or what to do.
And this is an open question that anyone feels free to answer. When stuff like that happens in Sudan, what can we do as a diaspora? What can we do? So Haja said that she felt helpless. What can we do in the diaspora to not feel so helpless to contribute to some sort of change.
Yeah, if I can say something about the 3rd of July as well, the massacre. I remember that day.
Ahmed, if you could
Not
speak up a
listening.
little bit, we've got a few comments saying that they can't hear you. If you just raise your volume. Shukran.
I said, back in memories of the 3rd of June, the massacre that happened. I remember going to the protest after it, and we were staring at each other, Maha, Libi, Mohsen, and we didn't even have a voice to chant, you know. It was in Ramadan. It was brutal. Yani even the timing of it, it was disaster. But the one conclusion I came of it is our unity, and these myrtles left us with the وصية, if I can say this in Arabic. تركوا لنا وصية. الوصية كانت حرية، سلام، وعدالة. دي العهد اللي بيناتنا وإننا نحن نبنيه. فما في وقت للتخاذل ولا للإحباط ولا لأي حاجة. I was a victim of يعني مسكني الإحباط لدرجة إنه أنا كنت حاسس بالذنب اتجاه يعني واحد من المسؤولين، إنه كيف دي حاجة تحصل. يعني الناس دي طلعت ثورة وبتطلب بحقوق، يعني إنه بس الناس طلعت عشان تطلب حقها والواحد يموت. فالوصية بيني وبينهم كانت إننا نحن من السودان. So as a generation or as a diaspora, I think is each one of us have a role. أو كل واحد فينا في المجتمع عنده دور. كان أنت مهما إن أنت سوداني أنت عندك دور لازم تلعبه في الثورة. كان في السودان بالإنتاج، كنت كان عندك نية تمشي السودان، أنت السودان ده داخليا لازم ننتج، خارجيا نحن لازم نوحد نفسنا ونوحد صفوفنا، يكون عندنا بلاتفورم as a community. الكوميونيتي دي we support ourselves from it، يعني as a Sudanese community. لأنه في جاليات تانية، عندك الجاليات الآسيوية، الجاليات الكاريبية، الجاليات دي كلها من أكبر الجاليات في بريطانيا. ولما يكون كان في مظاهرات أو في حاجة، هم عندهم impact، لأنه عندهم impact on society in terms of shops, in terms of في impact within the market. But Sudanese people, عشان نحن ما عندنا community دي, we don't have this base support for our community. دي الحاجة اللي نحن فاقدينها. just to get a petition signed, it took us a week. يعني to sign a petition just عشان كلامنا يتسمع في البرلمان. And we got a chance to speak. سوينا معرض في البرلمان هنا في بريطانيا، وفي جامعة ساوس، وفي ايرلندا برضو. انه كنا بنعرض فوقه الاحتصام والستن يعني حاجة مسخرة كده من صور الميدان الاحتصام. فالخطوة يعني الجاية هي البناء. إنه there's a stage. يعني revolution, when revolution started, we started on the street. Then from the street we took it to the military camp. Then from the military camp, now we have half of the government as the civilian side. The next stage is, as a diasporas, I think we have the bridge, or to build up the bridge in terms of trading. يعني في مزارع حتشتغل، انت you need to work in yourself. حتى for you as a diaspora, be the help for these newcomers and know how to settle into the country in terms of courses, things like that. These حاجات دي قاعد سووها الشباب. في حاجات هنا groups شباب سودانيين هنا شغالين فيها. So that's the role as a diaspora. I think we have to work on this and to create a base to fund our community, to unite all the communities. يعني الحكاية دي ما بس تكون محصورة في لندن بس تكون يعني على مدى العالم كله. إنه يعني في كل دولة في جالية سودانية وفيها platform that can finance it, we support each other. حتى يعني بدل ما انا وانت نمشي نودع قروشنا او الماهيه اللي بتجينا انا خاشه في البنك في لويدز او whatsoever نحن بنخلق لنا بنك بنانا كده سوداني بنقدر ناخذ فوقه حاجاتنا على الاقل. نحن الفند دي if you want mortgage if you want business الحياة دي بتتسهل لك الا انك انت عندك funds عندك حاجه تضغط بها الكوميونتي بتضغط بها الجفرمنت. انت عندك some sort of I'm sorry but يعني upper hand انه يعني تقدر حاجه يعني to negotiate with او ما negotiate but يعني to give back يعني. فانتوا رايكم شنو؟
صح. Thank you. Isra, you're a young rising star. Inshallah, you'll be a Labour councillor very soon. My question to you is, when the Sudanese revolution happened, before Omar al-Bashir was toppled, we saw many statements from the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, from the Democrats, from the Republicans, from Western governments. But once Omar al-Bashir left, it's as if the West and the international community was like, khalas, it's all finished, it was a success, we don't need to worry about Sudan no more. And I think in Sudan, the military council seems to be aware that the international community is not paying close attention. Now, if inshallah you will enter the corridors of power and you'll be a very successful politician, as a Sudanese person who inshallah will be in British politics very soon, what can we do to change that? What can we do to make sure that the politicians don't just talk about something when there's a hashtag or it's trending, but actually put pressure on governments that they trade with? Essentially, they trade with the Sudanese government at the moment. They've got trade deals, they're negotiating with them, but yet they do not seem to be holding them accountable for the massacre that happened 2 years ago, or just under 2 years ago, and there still isn't no trial. There still isn't been any real accountability.
Okay, so yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good topic to talk about. Obviously, at the time, I feel like the reason we got the government's attention in so many different countries, not just the UK, was the amount of pressure Sudanese people were putting on the government. Everyone was very, riled up about the protests and the uprising that was happening. And I feel like some people forgot the goal of the protest. Of course, it was, to take Omar Bashir away and take that government away. But also that wasn't just the main goal. The main goal was to get some basic human rights for, Sudanese people. And I feel like the reason it kind of went in a really high climax and then came back down is because people felt very discouraged due to the very high expectations they had of what the protest would bring out. I feel people shouldn't get discouraged. You should remember, like, the government that we got rid of was a government that was not for the people. They only cared about themselves and they only cared about money. The fact that the protests happened due to basic human rights, such as just bread and, petrol and diesel, just comes to show that we weren't asking for much at all, and they still didn't care. And once here in the UK and in France and all these places, people finally signed petitions and people finally pushed for it, that's when it got everyone's attention. And that's when everyone's like, okay, yes, we're going to do something about it, because other countries realize they can't just sit back and let something happen when it's in the media so much, especially considering the fact that a lot of Sudanese youth and Sudanese protesters made sure to get things across, and they filmed, everything was documented, everything was all over social media, over Twitter. Everyone got to see everything that was happening, all the people that were dying, the way the government was treating, protesters. When it was a peaceful protest, there was no retaliation whatsoever. It just came to show, you can't sit back and let things like this happen. And it was very important for other people in government to basically just, say, like, we need to support this and we need to do that. And Sudan is doing well right now. There's some good deals going on and we're finally making some sort of progress. However, I feel like that progress isn't going to happen overnight. So people just need to be patient but not discouraged. They should still keep fighting, because the only way you're going to keep getting the government's attention is through putting pressure on them. It's through signing petition. It's to keep talking about it, and not just because it happened overnight and, you know, yeah, Murabashu is gone and then that's it, we're going to, no, you have to keep fighting for justice. You know, we haven't seen his trial, we still haven't seen justice done, we still want justice, we still want him to be sentenced, we still want all government officials that were involved in that to be sentenced, and we shouldn't stop until that happens, because that's justice, that's something that's happened finally, you know, we can see that. But yeah.
Just to add on to what Isra said, I feel like she's definitely right. And as Ahmed said, the amana يعني من الشهداء إنه نحنا we continue to act in the way that we can from the diaspora, which means to put pressure through petitions. But also I think there's a big role for social media in what we do. So even if it means staying up to date with things that are going on in Sudan, that's number one. So maybe you can't do much, but you can still be aware of what's happening. So when the time comes to act, you can do so. And talking about Sudan all the time, so with fellow Sudanese people, and also if you are someone who's in the public sphere, so لو انت زول معروف يعني إنه طوالي تكون بتتكلم عن السودان, you're bringing up the topics that are relevant. Maybe it even means breaking things down for people who are living outside of Sudan. So maybe the Irish people here or the British people in Britain, making things a little bit easier for them to understand. لأنه هي المشكلة الوحيدة إنه الناس اللي هنا ما فاهمين السياسة في السودان. So they don't understand the politics in Sudan. That's why sometimes we don't get as much support as we want. يعني for example نحن لما أول بدينا يعني نطلع في الشارع we were going on our protests, ما كان عندنا دعم كبير من the Irish community. We didn't have a lot of support from the Irish community. عشان ما في زول عارف إنه what's going on in Sudan, ما في زول عارف إنه في حاجة في ثورة في السودان. لكن كل ما نحنا we integrated ourselves into their communities, يعني نحنا مشينا عملنا talks in their communities في ال community centers بتاعتهم. The more they were on board and they understood that Sudan is أول حاجة إنه في بلد اسمها سودان إنه في ناس سودانيين قاعدين معاهم في البلد دي وفي ناس يعني سودانيين contributing to their societies يعني from in all aspects. بعد ذاك they were taking things a little bit more seriously. So I think the fact that Isra, you know, she's very politically involved, that's going to give us and Sudan, you know, her and Sudan a very big advantage to raise that awareness. So that's what I feel like this is our role now after the Thawra, is إنه دي الأمانة حقتنا إنه نحنا we have to carry on the message of حرية سلام وعدالة that the shuhada have died for. So that's what I wanted to add. So you're in a very big, you have a very big advantage to bring Sudan forward.
Shukran, that was very eloquently put. So we're going to show, that's a nice segue for our short video that we're going to show, and then we'll continue the discussion. So we're going to play a video now from Scotland, and then we'll continue. There's a video from protests in Scotland, and we've got our own representation of Scotland here in this chat. We've got Zainab, who's studying at St Andrews University. And I wanted to ask you, Zainab, I assume when everyone changed their Instagram and Twitter and Facebook profiles to blue in solidarity with Sudan, I assumed that everyone started to ask you questions about your Sudanese identity. Can you talk a little bit about that? And can you also talk about if people still ask you about what's happening in Sudan now, or has their interest kind of dwindled a little bit?
Thank you for that question. I did have a lot of people who had never spoken to me about Sudan before. I saw them changing their profile photos on social media and things like that. I would say, unfortunately, since I guess the peak of the protests, the momentum has definitely dropped in terms of people's awareness about what's going on in Sudan. Even now, when I speak to them about a piece of news that would come out, they would say things like, "Oh, I thought everything was better now because al-Bashir is gone," and the reality is it's not that simple. And yeah, change isn't going to happen overnight, although there have been some positive steps. But yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, when I went to Sudan, that seemed to be a common theme. Although on the outside it looks like we had a successful revolution, on the ground that wasn't reflected on how people felt, and that kind of shocked me a little bit by how disappointed and demoralized so many people were. And essentially what I heard was that the military is still running the show, that Burhan, Hemeti are still the real people in power. And many felt, I'm not saying this is my opinion, but I'm echoing the opinions of those on the street. Many felt that Hamdok was just merely a puppet who was acting as he was calling the shots. Now, I want to talk about that a little bit, what people's opinions are on that, and if there is a disconnect with how we in the diaspora see the Sudanese revolution and how it is seen back home. So, Mohammed, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts? Salam, you're on mute again, my brother. Assalamu alaikum, mute, thanks.
I say, like, if you can go for someone else and then come back to me for it. Yeah. You heard me?
Yeah, I heard you. Hajar, what do you think
about the difference between how we perceive changes?
Twofold question. Part of the question is, do you think it was as successful as many in the West are painting it to be? And then the second part of that will be a follow-up and say, what do you think about how people in the diaspora see the revolution and those back home?
I think there are, in every revolution, you know, it's hard to say whether it was 100% successful 6 months and a year after the revolution. What I think was successful part of the revolution is that Sudanese people got their power back, or their sense of, you know, that they were able to do some change. And that's something that it will stay with us for a long time. So what I noticed during the 30 years of Omar al-Bashir is that يعني السودانيين كانوا محبطين. They didn't feel, you know, they could do anything. They were hopeless completely, and they felt anything that they did, they wasn't going to bring about change. So there were, as we said, there was a lot of uprisings in the last 30 plus years. It wasn't just this revolution. Like, everyone saw how those ended, and they felt they couldn't do anything. Now I feel like people have a sense of, يعني لو حصلت حاجة, we'll go out in the streets again. You know, there's always this vehicle to have change. So for me, يعني that's a very difficult question. I can't answer whether the revolution was successful or not. From a personal perspective, طبعا I feel like it was very successful in changing attitudes in Sudan, or starting the change process. Is there a difference between how we see things in Sudan and how people in Sudan see it? Absolutely as well. طبعا الناس اللي في السودان they're living through, يعني هم عايشين في الوضع ده, شايفين الحاجات in their day to day. It's not the same as when we read about things, يعني إنه ما في عيش, ما في بنزين. it's different than when you're living it day to day. I feel as well إنه في السودان الناس يعني بتواضعوا يعني if something bad is happening they will change the way they act to to go along with the situation. لكن نحن لما نسمع حاجة from the outside يعني ما في بترول and this whole revolution has gone through, we get very angry and very heated about it. لكن الناس السودان they tend to go with it لأنه they've seen worse, they've been through worse. So yeah, I don't know what the answer to that question is. Yes, we definitely see things differently because we're not living the same reality. And how do we integrate everything together? How do we see eye to eye? That's a question I want to ask you guys. How do you think we can do that?
It's a great question. Does anyone want to take that? Isra?
All right. So was the question just how we can? What was the question? Sorry.
Question is, how do we unify our, how do we see things the same way as people in Sudan see it, so that we can try and build to a common goal?
Okay. I think for us to all see eye to eye is something that's very important, and we already know that that's possible because of the revolution. We all came together, no matter what our differences when it comes to age, whatever. We all came together, and that's how we were able to see eye to eye. I feel at the same time, we all need to have a common goal, and the common goal right now is just basic human rights. It's still the exact same thing. We want justice, we want basic human rights, and that's what everyone wants at the end of the day. And that's the way for it, for us to all just want the same thing. And if we want the same thing, then it will definitely happen, because nothing's going to be able to stop this. Like you said, if something doesn't go our way, we will go out, we will protest, and we will get that back, because now we know how strong we are, we know how powerful we are, we know that we can gain that, we've gained that power, and we know that we're not going to stand for anything less. So I think that's really important. There was a question here in the comments, and they basically were asking what for us as individuals will be able to offer directly for change in Sudan. And obviously, I want everyone else to answer it too. For me personally, I've had goals about Sudan since I was very young. I'm very passionate about Sudan, and I go visit every year. I think because I really, really do feel connected to Sudan. It's my identity, it's who I am, it will always be part of me. And my future goal is to hopefully be within the Sudanese politics and do one day run for presidency, even though I think it'll be really tough considering that I am a woman. But I feel like that's something that everyone will really be kind of a bit weird about it, considering it's going to be a woman who wants to, be in politics and have that power. I think that's really important. And also, I'm currently studying pharmacy, and I've been doing a lot of my research, and my goal is to work with pharmaceutical companies to help aid Sudan. So, even the littlest things in Sudan when we do go there is, the smallest thing is not available in pharmacies, like paracetamol or Panadol or anything. So that's really important, and we're that youth, and we know we have the power, because at the end of the day, everything that's happening in Sudan is going to be our future, because, it's going to affect us more than anyone else. So it's really important to understand that we can come together. We've done it before, we can do it again, and we shouldn't stop until all the goals that we are demanding are met.
So there's a good question that got posed. Mohammed, you wanted to say something about petition, and then maybe you could try answer.
I actually wanted to highlight a couple of stuff about the petition that Ahmed Tukruni mentioned. Actually, we are more than 10K here in the UK, but unfortunately, at the beginning, we felt like to gain like 10K signature for the UK government. But there was a team like done a really good job, and I was part of them. So like there we all like Sudanese youth came from different cities across the UK. We're working in the petition that made by Dr. Willow from Newcastle, calling on the British government to condemn in the strongest terms the Sudanese regime's use of lethal force, including live ammunition. against the pro-democracy movement in Sudan. So, we've been really targeting the celebrities and leading campaigns like to push this position beyond the Sudanese community, and we really successfully done that. And I think some of these people were Mandoor al-Mahdi وآل صديق, ريانات من London, محمد جعفر وفاطمة Jack in Leeds. And I'm not sure if Isra was part of that team or not. So yeah.
So just to piggyback off your petition comment, in that the role of the diaspora in their own countries that they're living in and how they can aid Sudan. So we are getting a lot of questions here about what do we think, as Isra said, what do we think we personally can give to the Thawra? And I have a question as well to all of you. Do you think our role is more important here in the diaspora, or do you think it's time for us to take what we've learned here and bring it back to Sudan? And why would you think that way? So I think I'll start with you, Ahmed, if you want to answer that first.
Which Ahmed?
Ahmed Kaballo.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a point where we need to see how we can contribute and potentially go back home. But I think at the moment, it's important that we support those in Sudan from here as much as we can, financially, support their children that are going. We've got cousins. I'm sure Sudanese families are very big. I'm sure you, like me, have got many cousins that are going to university, going to college. So they need support, with applications, and all that type of support that we can give from here. Myself, I'm a journalist, so I feel like I can contribute to the struggle via talking about Sudan, interviewing people about Sudan, trying to raise awareness about what's happening, because many people before the Sudanese revolution, couldn't point Sudan on a map, didn't know anything about Sudan. So it's very difficult for them to, if they don't know where Sudan is, they don't know anything about Sudan, it's very difficult for them to pay attention when there's a massacre in Darfur, or where there's ethnic genocide or cleansing. So it's important that we do raise awareness, we do what Isra does, and use our positions of privilege to lobby governments to put pressure on Sudanese officials and military men who essentially need Sudan for trade and need the West for trade and business. So I think there's a role for us here in the UK and in the West, but there does become a point where we should try and use some of the expertise and skills that we've learned and go back to Sudan.
Yeah, I'm just gonna agree with you on that, Ahmed. I feel like before we go back, we need to learn new skills from here and apply those skills to Sudan, and me being politically active here, I am part of the Labour Party. I'm a member of the Labour Party. I personally view myself as a social democrat. That's how I identify when it comes to my political views. And I do feel like everything we learn here can be applied to Sudan. It doesn't matter what you're doing here. It doesn't matter what degree you're doing, what job you have, whatever. Sudan is a third world country. It does need a lot of help. And us moving back right now isn't really going to help the situation. We should develop our skills and knowledge even more, and then move there, and then help Sudan develop. And we don't have to move. We can do it from here. We can push for petitions, like you said. We can push for governments to respond to things, and I think that's really the way for it.
And
just
one more
point. Sorry, just one point, and then I'll let someone else answer. There was a revolutionary Pan-African thinker called Marcus Garvey, and he was asked these questions about African Americans and Africans in the diaspora going back, and he says, if they're useless here, they're going to be useless back there. And it's a bit of a frank way of putting it, but I do think we have to develop our skills so that we can go back there and be useful. I think sometimes, because we're in the West, we have this kind of, some of us, not all, we can have this superiority complex where we're like, we're coming from London, I want to be the president of this company, I want to be the chief executive of that company. No, if you was playing PlayStation and useless in London, that means you're going to go back to Sudan, play PlayStation and be useless there. So develop skills, have something to contribute. And when you have something to contribute, that's when you go back.
That's a very good point. And one thing someone in the comments actually raised, and I think it's a really, really good point. So Mahira said that, you know, one thing we can do is put pressure on the government, which you guys touched on, and also instead of pumping a lot of money into Sudan, and I know a lot of us at the time, so يعني لما نسمع إنه في أي حاجة كارثة حصلت في السودان, all of us go and we donate, give money, which is great. لكن we need to put policies, we need to train people to be able to deal with catastrophes rather than just money. يعني القروش دي, it's great, لكن it won't teach people, it won't bring about the proper change that we need. So maybe we have a role in training, you know, people in Sudan. And I'm not saying just in specific fields, I'm saying in all different fields. يعني the thing that will bring us forward as a nation is to be able to do things on our own and not depending on handouts or, you know, money from different countries. يعني انتو لو you're following the news in Sudan, every time there's a deal signed with a country, the UK was the recent one, you know, money being pumped into Sudan, and that's where the mix-up was happening in the previous government, in that there was lots of money coming in, like it wasn't being used, or we didn't benefit from it. So I think our role is not just to supply money, but also to train in the fields that we're experienced in, and try bring about change in that way. And I wanted to ask Zainab as well, because I know she's studying some politics in college, and what she thinks she can train people in Sudan, or what she thinks would be useful in that sense.
Thank you. I think first, I think we have to have the infrastructure, because of the issue that you just raised about, you know, there's a lot of money. But for example, if I was, you know, say a community organizer and I want to start this new initiative, there's no infrastructure in place, as far as I know, for me to apply for the government. Can you know, give us a grant for this? All of the money usually comes from outside charity organizations, and they have their, or NGOs, and they have their own, I guess there's barriers, and there's also agendas in terms of the goal normally isn't capacity building or empowering the local community. It's the money's usually ring fenced. So I think that would be an important first step, is to have our own funding and in order to be able to build from the bottom up, and that capacity building being community led, because no one knows what that community needs better than the community itself.
It's a great point. Great point. I wanted to bring Ahmed and then Mohammed in. You're on mute again.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think revolution is a change. So, and a change starts with ourselves. So, taking a step forward in changing yourself, as you said, Ahmed. If you use this here, you're gonna be useless there. So, yeah, it just self development, then community development, then it becomes a nation development. Yeah, inshallah, that's the way forward, inshallah.
If I could just add to what everyone said real quick. I think يعني المفروض نفكر في السودان like it's a human body, and يعني لو رئتك وقفت and your kidney stopped and whatever يعني حتموت, right? So we need to think about different departments within Sudan. يعني مدارس ما كويسة, مستشفيات ما كويسة, البوليس ما كويس, like the social justice system ما كويس. So it's never going to work. Sudan is never going to move forward until we have better police, until we have a better education system, until we have better healthcare. We're never going to move forward, and that's how people should think about it. It's very important, and that's basically what we're asking for. We're never going to move forward because these different departments are corrupt at the moment. You know, when it comes to schools, when it comes to the healthcare, everything. Even with COVID, if you think about the way hospitals dealt with COVID, there was no oxygen, there was nothing, and that's why a lot of people died. And we need to think about that. We need to think about the fact that Sudan's never going to move forward until all parts of the human body work, you know. So I think that's very important. That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for better police, for better education, for better healthcare, you know, for a better justice system overall.
That's a very good point.
A question for you guys. Like what did you do like during the sit-in and before the sit-in in front of the army headquarters, and how did you contribute like in the revolution? If you could highlight that.
Okay, I'll answer that. I just wanted to make one final point on the previous discussion because I think it's an important one, and I'll answer your question. I went to a forum and it was talking about migrants dying in the sea. And one of the biggest problems, not just in Sudan, but in Africa as a whole, is when we send money back, we send it back to our individual family members. That the money that Africans send from the West, from the Middle East, from around the world back to Africa is actually much greater than all of the aid charity donations put together. But the problem is that we send it back to our individual family members. So what happens is I'll send money to my aunt and my aunt will have a generator, and then the house next door doesn't have a generator. So she says to her son, Emshi, Europe, you need to go to Europe. And then this is what's caused the recent migration crisis. It's not just the poverty, it's the inequality. Now, one thing that I'd like to push, and I think as a diaspora we need to push, is instead of sending money back to our individual family members, if we put it in some sort of fund and then we build up communities. So we build up the local hospital in Hilad Khojili, or we build up the school, and then we build up the Department of Justice. So I really want to answer Mohammed's question, but it was just one final point that came to me while people were talking about the previous thing. So sorry, let me answer Mohammed's question and then I'll get everyone else's response. So regarding the sit-in, I went to the protests. I wrote to my MPs. I tried to raise awareness to people. I did some speeches, events. I tried to do what I could. And of course, I tried to contact family members and friends back in Sudan, but because there was a blackout, it was difficult to get in contact with people and see how much more we could contribute directly. But for me personally, I was just trying to raise awareness about what had happened, because there was a lot of disinformation. Not many people understood what had happened and why it happened, and if Bashir wasn't there, why was there a massacre? And I was just trying to educate people on social media, friends and colleagues.
Yeah, I think we were all the same, and protesting and raising awareness was a big one. I think the thing that drew attention to Sudanese community in Ireland was we protested on the day as everyone else did, and we had some activists who had heard about the massacre in Sudan, and they came, and they had never been to any of the other protests. So when they came to raise awareness, they raised our voices then to the parliament. At the beginning, we were trying very hard, sending letters to our local, they're like MPs, which we call TDs, trying any way we can to get the Irish government to just, understand what's going on in Sudan. And we didn't get any of that. So when things were, there was a huge media kind of around it, everyone was learning about the Sudanese revolution at that time. I felt more people were coming to those protests, and from different types of cultures and backgrounds, and that's when we got more attention. So for us, it was mainly to keep up the momentum, to keep going, but despite the fact that it was such a sad time, because we needed to do that. So that's what we were contributing, after let's say the sit-in was dispersed. I would say before the sit-in was even before the sit-in came into place. I think the thing I did the most was research about Sudan. I felt I didn't know a lot about Sudanese history, and that really put me in a good position to to inform people or bring it to them in a way that they understand. So education, I think, was the one thing that I really gained out of the Sodas learning about Sudan.
Okay. Does anyone else want to answer Mohammed's question before we move on to a short video?
Yeah, for me, the sit-in was the favorite moment was when he turned to school. There's a school كانت في school كانت في مستشفى وكانت يعني الناس كلها كانت بتغني وبترقص مع الجيش فالجيش والشعب كله يعني was in one harmony. في نفس الوقت كان الناس قعدوا ولا ما قعدوا اتفقوا ولا ما اتفقوا. These moments كانت was my favorite moment لأنه الناس كلها كانت بتكون في قلب واحد. You know, waiting for that decision. So
okay, so now we've got a video from one of her guest speakers who mentioned earlier that she spoke in Parliament, and we've got actually a short video of that, and it demonstrates her contribution to the Sudanese revolution. So we're going to play that now, and then we'll continue the discussion.
Afternoon all. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone who is in attendance today, who has dedicated their time to listen to us, and I hope that this briefing will compel you to take more definitive action with regards to the situation in Sudan. My name is Hajid, which is in Arabic a verb meaning to migrate, and as someone who has never settled in one place my entire life, I couldn't think of a more fitting name. I like to think of myself as a migratory bird who, despite wherever I go, I will always answer to the call of home. And the call of home this time has been a song of freedom and change and hope. So when you all think of Sudan, you think of another struggling African nation. Why should I care? Why should I watch? Why should I listen? Why should I take action? Sudan is on the road to revolutionary change. Change that can influence the entire continent of Africa, the Arab world, and has the potential to affect the world. The Sudanese people have learned from those before them and their own history that the only way to beat oppression and violence is through their peacefulness. They are wise, they are resilient, but most importantly, they will not succumb to violence. As politicians, as human rights organizations, as activists, but most importantly, as justice-loving humans, you should all embody the Sudanese revolution. You should all embody what the brave Sudanese people are standing for, like Sarah Khalifa, who is here with us, and the countless Sudanese women who, despite gender-based violence, the risk of rape and torture, attend every protest, not only to fight for their future, but to stand resilient for the women who came before them, and their young daughters who will come after them. A future where Sudanese women will be at the forefront of social and political change. You should all embody the spirit of Dr. Babikir, a young doctor killed while saving the lives of innocent protesters. He carried medical supplies in his backpack, but what he really carried that day was the hope of an entire nation on his back. You should all embody Sudanese people like Ahmed, a teacher and a peaceful protester who was raped, beaten and tortured to death by security forces. Ahmed taught us more than what he could have taught us in a classroom. He taught us the meaning of hope, courage, strength and sacrifice. You should all learn from the countless people who, instead of carrying weapons, picked up their paintbrushes, their microphones and their pencils. They faced incoming bullets with art and poetry and music. They fought an oppressive system with their ideas. We should all embody the Sudanese people who, despite countless massacres, despite tears of sorrow that rained heavy on their hearts, despite the rivers of blood that flowed beneath their feet, still found the courage to continue their peaceful movement. The people who truly taught the world the meaning of resilience and perseverance. The people who refuse to let injustice win. So why should you listen? Why should you care? Why should you watch? Why should you take a stance? Because staying silent while the brave Sudanese people who stood against injustice continue to be oppressed due to EU policies and funding mean that you are complicit in a crime against justice everywhere. Why should you listen? Why should you care? Why should you watch? Why should you take a stance? Because you should all be a representation of what the Sudanese revolution embodies. You should all be a representation of Hurriya, Salam, Adala, freedom, peace, and justice. Thank you.
MashaAllah.
It's a little bit embarrassing to. I've never watched that video. I've kind of stayed away from watching this stuff, so it's a little bit embarrassing.
That was really great, Haji.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
shouldn't be embarrassed. That was amazing, mashallah. And you are the embodiment of the Sudanese revolution and the future and the hope. You and the young women that carried the flag and raised the profile of Sudan. So thank you for that. Just wanted to ask you before we move on, what was your thoughts about how it was received? And also, you spoke so eloquently, but when I went to Sudan and I interviewed politicians, a lot of them were old men. Why do you think young women like you are not taking more of a leadership role, considering you played such a pivotal role in the revolution itself?
So to answer the first question is how was it received? Yeah, they received it. It was, they got the point across. You guys didn't see the rest. There was a question and answer session. And a lot of the questions were, you know, what does Ireland have to do with this? You know, what can we contribute? Why are you guys in the parliament telling us about this? So it got very heated at some point, and they understood just the power of the youth. You know, that was a recurrent theme in there. There was another speaker as well, May. She delivered a really, really good speech about the contribution of Sudanese women in Sudan and the youth of Sudan. So they really, you know, by the end of it, I could tell that they finally got the point. We finally got the point across. So that was very well received. Yeah, and they were kind of scared. They were kind of scared at the end. I got very heated. I got very passionate. Lano, that was a couple of weeks after the massacre, and we have a family member who was killed in the massacre. I was very passionate about it. I was very upset. I was kind of tired of them and the fact that, you know, they were trying to bring in their Western brain into the Sudanese revolution rather than just listening to us. So it got very passionate and very heated. So they took it well. What I would say about why is it still old men? Because of the culture of Sudan and, you know, the deep roots of, I don't want to say بس الكيزان عملوا كذا, لكن the culture, Sudanese culture is very male orientated, old male, Arabic speaking, traditional based. يعني هسي we can see it in the comments. يعني أنا هسي بقرأ في comments as we're doing the discussion. يعني الناس كلهم بيتكلموا ليه بيتكلموا بالإنجليزي. They're not a representation of a SODA, youth of Sudan, because there's a lack of inclusiveness. نحن كلنا سودانيين وكلنا بهمنا السودان وكلنا بنحب السودان, وأنا هسي لو أدوني طيارة برجع السودان وبعيش في السودان بالوضع الكعب ده. لأنه this is something that's been born in me since I was very young. Just because I live here, I look like this, إنه أنا مرة, إنه أنا عايشة في ايرلندا, يمكن انتوا قايلين ما بفهم ولا ما بعرف ولا ما بحس. It doesn't mean that I should be excluded from having a role in the Sudanese community. يعني نحن, and my parents always say this, I think it's very important, إنه نحن كلنا, we contribute so much to Sudan from the diaspora. There are so many things that we have contributed from here to there. طبعا الناس اللي قدموا بحياتهم, the people who died, we will never be able to, you know, give as much as they have given. لكن we're trying our best. يعني زي ما محمد or أحمد قال, كان مشينا السودان هسي, maybe we won't be as useful as we are here. But I think that the love for Sudan is there, the passion is there. So include us in politics, include us in the discussions, don't shut us out. And I think that's my main and important point, إنه أنا كل ما أمشي السودان بحس إنه يعني أنا بتكلم عربي وبفهمهم وبفهم السياسة السودانية شوية, يعني بفهم السياسة في السودان وبحاول إنه to read up and to understand the history. Some history I know more than my cousins who grew up in Sudan and they learned the curriculum of Sudan. I'm trying my best. That's more effort than they're putting in to learn in their own country. Include us لأنه نحن عندنا حاجات أنتوا ممكن تستفيدوا منها وأنتوا عندكم معلومات نحن حنستفيد منها. The things that we will you know, and the point is be open rather than be dismissive. So هم بيتكلموا بالإنجليزي ما حنسمع كلامهم. Okay, that's fine. هن ما عاشوا في السودان ما بيقدروا يتكلموا ولا يدونا رأيهم. لكن نحن ما جايين من we're not coming from a defensive point. ما إنه نحن أحسن منكم. نحن بس دارين نحس إنه نحن we're part of you وممكن نقدم حاجة للسودان برضو. So yes, we need to kick the old man out of Sudanese politics, and I think it's going to start with Isra, and she's going to pave the path for all of us, inshallah.
I just want to build on that because I was looking at the comments as well. يعني أنا مولودة في السودان بمشي السودان كل سنة لمدة شهرين ثلاثة عشان just so I don't lose my identity, just so I stay in touch with Sudan. يعني the amount of people are saying that بيتكلموا عربي بيتكلموا إنجليزي بس I'm sorry but then you send your children to British schools in Sudan, so you can't, there's no yin and yang here, you have to pick one. يعني we want to be part of this, and we are, at the end of the day, you will never be able to take the identity from us. We are Sudanese at the end of the day. You know, when people ask me like, where are you from? It's Sudan. End of story. Like, I'm not going to give you a backstory and say, oh yeah, I'm Irish or I'm English or whatever. No, it's Sudan. And I feel like the reason some old men are threatened by us rather than they feel like, you know, I'm not going to listen to you, it's because they're threatened. It's because to some level they agreed with the past government and the fact that we are here right now and we're saying, no, we're not going to stand for this. Oh, because Sudanese people, we're not going to, you know, sit back and just let you, we are going to be a part of this. And they're very threatened and they're feeling scared. The fact that young people are basically doing a job of old men that, you know, can't even get this across. So I feel like, you know, when it comes to speaking Arabic and feeling, you know, having that sense of identity or where we belong to Sudan. We're all Sudanese at the end of the day. It runs through our veins, it runs through our blood. Do you know what I mean? So people need to think about that. You won't be able to strip my identity away from me no matter what you say, no matter what you tell me. I am Sudanese at the end of the day. So yeah.
Very powerfully put. That leads to the next talking point and possibly the final talking point about unity. So we've touched on this just now in the discussion, potentially the differences between the different generations and also the different sexes. One thing that I find interesting about Sudanese culture, and it may be just my individual perspective, is we have a lot of respect for Haboba, the old Sudanese woman, but not so much for the young. So it doesn't seem to be, not to say there isn't sexism, of course there is sexism, but there is a level of respect for the older Sudanese woman. How do we translate that so that it's not generational, that women are respected full stop, regardless of whether they're old or they're young? Again, it's an open question. Anyone feel free to answer it, or if they agree or disagree.
I agree. Of course, yani, respect is the fundamental of a human right. Yani, to respect someone, not or not to disrespect anyone for any hate that you have or on your own issues. So if that's to be raised up, yani, a bit mixture of the society need to learn how to treat a female or يعني زي ما انت عندك اخت زي ما عندك انت عندك يعني you need to look at it like this. يعني انه في النهاية يعني هي جاية من بيت سوداني زي ما انت جيت من بيت سوداني. So that's the mentality should be. يعني
Zainab, your thoughts?
I think again it goes back to the idea of like the infrastructure that empowers women so that they have equal rights to the men. So for the women to feel safe going out in the street, and to work and to get an education. I think those are the fundamental things that need to be addressed, and from that it will permeate into the culture, because at the moment, if the role of the woman is relegated to the household, then we're not going to educate young men to respect her, if that makes sense. Or we're not going to be able to until, she has the power to do the things that she wants to do without society like standing in her way.
Just to add to Zainab's point as well, I think في السودان, or it's a Western idea actually, يعني الزول اللي بيكون قاعد في البيت, the housewife, is seen as less than someone who is contributing in a different way to society. يعني the person اللي بيربي في الأولاد, دول الأولاد that are going to contribute to the community. So they should be the people who are most respected, I think. So there's this seeping of Western ideas in Sudan as well, in that if a woman is not, becoming something that is respectful of society, she's just at home, or whatever, then people won't respect her. And I think we need to strip it back to the basics. And نحن زمان in the culture, traditional culture Sudani, women are very respected in the household, and I think that's where we need to start off, in that just you're a human being, you deserve as much respect as someone else, regardless of what you contribute or what you contribute to in society. And I'm just going to piggyback off your point, Ahmed, in that we're talking about, the disparities or the differences in the Sudanese culture, and a lot of people brought this up, is racism. So I just want to get your guys' thoughts on it, because this is a huge, huge thing. We can talk about it for a long time, is the role of racism in rebuilding back Sudan, or what we can do to combat this. So anyone can answer this question.
That was a great question, and something that I was going to bring up. Racism is something that I've noticed from a very young age in Sudan, and for us, especially in the diaspora, I think we have a unique perspective on this, because when we come to the UK, we are just black. We have the discrimination that all black people have. It's only when we go to Sudan that some of us are seen to be from a privileged racial minority. So to me, there seemed to be something that didn't make sense, that when I get stopped and searched by the police, when I get discriminated in school, when I get certain things said to me because I've got black skin in the UK, for me to go to Sudan and join in with my cousins saying it to people from the Nuba Mountains, from Darfur, from South Sudan. So I always felt that this was wrong, and from a really, really early age. And even in this talk itself, we're all from a similar kind of what in Sudan's society considered to be racial background. And I don't know if it's a chicken or egg, because in Sudan it's divided, that means here we are divided, or if we can reverse it and we try to show unity here, show unity outside in the diaspora, and then that will translate back into Sudan. So let's hear your thoughts. Mohammed, what do you think? You're on mute again, my brother. Mohammed, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. So I'll talk in Arabic, and I will mention a couple of stuff. First of all, عن الناس دي إنها هي بتتكلم يعني باللغة الإنجليزية أو ما بيتكلموا بالعربي، لأنه هم عايزين يعني يدوا رأيهم بأريحية، يعني لأنه لغتنا الأم هي ما العربي. الحاجة الثانية موضوع إنه هم يكونوا أحسن منكم أو ديل يكونوا أحسن من ديل. كلنا السودانيين وكلنا يعني تعبنا وساهمنا في الثورة دي يعني بنفس الإحساس وبنفس الدافع يعني. واعتقد انه دي حاجه متكامله. يعني نحن الحاجه الوحيده اللي بعتقد انها نجحت الثوره دي انه نحن كنا متحدين، بغض النظر عن انه نحن كان يعني الباك جراوند بتاعتنا سياسيه ولا عرقيه ولا دينيه، كان ما في اختلاف، كان همنا الواحد انه نحن نسقط النظام. الناس اللي كانت في السودان كان ليها يعني دور كبير، الناس اللي كانت في الصفوف الأمامية اللي جابوا الترسانات بتاعت النظام، الناس اللي تم اعتقالهم، الناس الشهداء اللي ماتوا. بنفس الشكل في ناس ساهمت هنا، يعني الناس في يوكي يعني كانوا شايلين هم البلد برضو، يعني كانوا هم صوت الشعب لما كان عاملين بلاك اوت للانترنت في السودان. يعني كانوا هم اللي بيسبورت السئن اللي كان في القياده العامه. يعني كانوا الناس دي ديديكيتد موست اوف ذا تايم يعني للسوشيال ميديا وللكامبينز عشان يوصلوا صوتكم للعالم، يعني عشان تريدايركت الديلي نيوز، الفوتوز، الفيديوز that coming from Sudan. فما في زول بيمن على الثاني بالحاجه اللي عملها، يعني ده كلنا كان واجبنا وكلنا عملنا الحاجه دي عشان البلد، وبالتالي نحن عندنا نفس الفرصه يعني باننا ندلي بارائنا، باننا نشارك في قرارات، باننا يعني نشوف مستقبل بلدنا بعيون الناس اللي هنا والناس اللي هناك. فعندنا نفس الفرصه يعني كلنا. اجي للنقطه الثانيه، الريسيزم. انا من فتره يمكن يعني ما طويله شديد ابتديت مع منظمه بتاعت ماستر بيس، وكنا شغالين في موضوع العنصريه which is the core of the problem يعني هناك في السودان. كنا بنمشي المدارس يعني to increase the awareness، وبنوريهم كيف انه يعملوا campaigns عشان to accept each other، عشان انه الناس دي مفروض ما في زول يعني يميز او يتعنصر على زول بسبب لونه، بسبب دينه، بسبب قبيلته والاشياء دي. برضو انا شايف انه الحاجه دي نحن اصلا ورثناها يعني من الجيل اللي قبلنا، يعني هم اللي كان زرعوا الحاجه دي في البدايه او كانوا يتعاملوا بعنصريه. الناس اللي بعديهم بقت تجي تشيل منهم، يعني ممكن اي زول لو سالته والله they're not gonna tell you oh my dad or my mom are racist but they are. يعني حتى المساله النسبيه تمام. الحل الوحيد انه نحن ما نورث الحاجه دي، ونحاول يعني كلنا نتقبل بعض، ومن غير ما انه يعني to try to discriminate like people here. So yeah I think دي الحاجه اللي انا شايفها.
لو ممكن بس أقول حاجة عن العنصرية في السودان، هي حاجة كعبة وحاجة حاصلة من زمان شديد، والناس خلاص مفروض يعرفوا إنه it's happening، وهي it's happening in Sudan and you need to accept it. يعني حتى ممكن ناس تقول لا هي ما حاصلة وما في كده، لا يعني هسه عادي في السودان لما نزول يمشي، أنت لو أسمراني خلاص أنت شين، أنت ما سمح، لو أنت أبيض و you know جسمك شكله سمح وأنت أبيض وخلاص. and this is western you know، دي حاجة جايبينها دي عشان البيوتي ستاندرد هنا في UK في western countries، إنه الزول هو أبيض إنه هو زول سمح. and people need to understand that. يعني حتى ما في كده، حتى في الناس لما تيجي تعرس لو انت شايقي ولا انت دنقلاوي، في ايشو هناك في الحاجه دي، انه لو انت من different tribe خلاص يعني this is a point. and دي حاجه it's racist and that's true، وهي عنصريه وهي حاصله، لكن الناس ما حاسة تتكلم عنها. يعني هسه أقل حاجة يعني أنا في السودان دائما لما نزول يعني هسه هنا في UK الناس بتعمل تاني، بيقعدوا برا بالشارع عشان شنو؟ عشان جسمهم يبقى darker، يبقى you know ازرقاني زيادة، صح ولا ما صح؟ لكن في السودان لو أنت عملت حاجة دي هسه هنا في السودان، في ناس كثير سودانيين بيقول لك ما تمرق الشارع في الشمس عشان حتبقى اسمراني. so what؟ عشان في شنو؟ why؟ يعني خلاص at the end of the day نحن ما من حتة واحدة، we come from different parts of Sudan, we have different veins running through us, you know, and people need to accept that. You need to accept إنه في different tribes. يعني في أكتر من زول، وما حاجة دي حاجة هسه ديفايد حاصل. الديفايد ده حاصل عشان زمان لما بريطانيا احتلت السودان it created this divide. حسيت بالبيبل إنه النورث يكون برا والساوث يكون برا والإيست يكون برا، ودي حاجة المفروض إن إحنا خلاص discuss it and to accept the fact that at the end of the day we're Sudan, you know, and إحنا من السودان كلنا at the end of the day we're all Sudanese, and we need to accept that we're going to come in different colors, we're going to come in different shapes, we're going to come in different sizes, and we're going to come from different tribes. And as soon as the time we you know we accept that, that's when we're going to finally move forward.
And I think education is a definitely a way to do that. في الجيل الجديد الشفع الصغار، التعليم دي الحاجة المهمة، إنه المقرر التعليم إنه يكون so good that these things are not seeping through. بعدين awareness in families، زي ما محمد قال إنه الناس بتقول أهلي ما racist وما عندهم عنصرية، لكن لو في زول جد قدم له زول من أي حتة تانية ولا من tribe تانية، ممكن أهله يعني to refuse for no reason at all. حتى الناس اللي عايشين هنا في الوest that have like a lot of or should have a lot of awareness. بعدين أنا I think إنه بيزعلوا يعني لو في زول they were racist to them but they can be racist elsewhere. So it's just about educating from the fundamental, from the beginning, education. And the other thing is microaggressions. So الحاجات الصغيرة الناس في السودان ما بيعتبروها إنه دي عنصرية، يعني أنا دي بس حاجة يعني معروفة ولا حاجة this is just the way they are. لكن it is racism, إنه to call them out and to hold people accountable for that whenever you see it. I think that's important.
Yeah, if I could say about racism, إنه مشكلة الريسيزم في السودان إنه actually حاجة وليدة جات مع نظام الإنقاذ في تفرق تسود، إنه تخلقوا النكات مع الشايقي والجعلي, you know, these small things that aggravated يعني. But in terms of racism, السودانيين they're not racist at all, لأنه في الحلة أنت بتتعايش مع كل أقطاب السودان. if you looked at just where you come from بتلقى فيها الشمالي، فيها الغربي، فيها الشرقي، فيها الجنوبي. يعني السودانيين as a society they're not racist. بيتعاملوا مع بعض، بيفطروا مع بعض، بيتزوجوا يعني من بعض، إلا يعني نسبة بسيطة يعني I would say يعني the problem of it الجهل برضو. يعني if you raise up awareness identity إنك you need to understand إن السودان made up of 400 tribes. يعني نحنا we made السودان كلها made up of 400 tribes، لكن أنت في النهاية سوداني. يعني أنت identity بتاعتك سوداني. يعني أنت if people كان خطوا القبلية بجنبه ونخط أي حاجة بجنبه بس تبقى سودانيين، racism will disappear within the next generation.
Okay, does anyone want to respond to that comment? If not, I wanted to say one thing that I noticed is my niece, she went to study in Sudan for a year. Her mom wanted her to get closer to Sudanese culture. And I asked her, what did they teach about Sudanese history? Did they teach about Merowe? Did they teach about Kush? Did they teach about the fact that we have more pyramids than Egypt, that we have the Kandakas, the Sudanese queens, and they built their pyramids even bigger than the pharaohs of the time? And she says, no, we didn't teach any of that stuff. They taught us about Henry VIII and his wives. So if that's happening in Sudan, then you can only imagine why there would be racism. I think racism, this type of racism, is all based on proximity to whiteness or Arabness. So whoever's closer to the Arabs, whoever's closer to the whites, is seen as the higher race. And I think that only happens because we don't take pride in who we are. I think if all Sudanese people understood the history about the things that we innovated, the things that we created, how we influenced the whole world through our culture, through our innovation, then we'd have a lot more pride and we'd have a lot more pride in who we are. And we wouldn't want to be Arabs. We want to be people from Saudi Arabia or people from Europe. We'd be proud to be Sudanese. Because when I went to Mary, and I've been there a few times now, and you look at the paintings, the people's noses are wider than mine and they look more African than me. So I take pride in that, and I take pride that I am a descendant of those people. And I think we should.
The history of Black heroes is something there. Yeah, I mean, the curriculum was changed by the previous government, and that's why something, education was one of the most important things to be changed back. Truly know our descendants and our heritage. We are, if you know, the land used to be called the land of kings or the sons of kings at one point of history. That's the land. That because of the numbers of hadarat or empires went through these land. Historically goes back to dates. That's the most of the time the racism was shown is when people have authority. Honestly, if you face racism, if for example, if you had problem, you went to a police station, you see the racism there, in a sense of, if you have someone, you're okay to go, but if you not, or if you're from certain tribe or from certain, or your color, it was because of the authority and the lack of the awareness of the authority that made people or made the public divide.
I think just to end this off, it's just to remember, at the end of the day, we're all Muslim, and in Islam, being discriminative and being racist is not part of that religion. If you truly identify as a Muslim, then that's something that you shouldn't be doing in the first place.
It's a great point. And we've been going for close to 2 hours now. So I'm going to get people's conclusive thoughts, final words. And I'm just going to ask you, what do you want to see going forward? And what do you plan to do to contribute to that change? So I'll start with Hajar, and then I'll move forward.
What I want to see going forward is just a strong sense of unity إنه الناس في السودان to come together. ما ننسى إنه في دم في الحاجة دي، إنه نحنا we spilled blood for this revolution, and that we should hold أي حكومة تجي there's going to be problems، ونحنا لازم نكون جاهزين إنه نقيف for our rights if there is any problem. So not to be hopeless، لكن اعرفوا إنه عندهم power and we can still bring about great change. So that would be the thing I would love to see, and that Sudanese people don't back down ever.
Mohammed?
I want to see the same Sudan that was in front of the army headquarters before the massacre. So that was a perfect example for the Sudan I've always just dreamed about. And I want to say, whatever happened and however the situation ended up, 2019, pro-democracy revolution will be one of the brightest spots in my life. And I will always be proud of that I was part of it. And I also have a message to whom it may concern. This generation will never get tired of going out back to streets again, and will never give up in having a safe, democratic Sudan for all the Sudanese people.
Thank you. That was beautifully put. Zainab?
I think for me, the most important thing is to see a civilian government, a fully civilian government, no one from the previous regime having any involvement, accountability for those crimes committed by the previous regime, and then for the general population, a proper infrastructure, a proper education system, a proper healthcare system, and just security for those citizens.
Thank you. Thank you. Ahmed? Salam, you're on mute again.
What I would like to see is an elected democratic government, inshallah, and just not to be called a third world country no more. That's inshallah. حنبنيه وما نيأس and don't give up. الثورة مستمرة. يعني your role will change, but the fight will never stop.
Shukran. And Isra?
I think it's just the same as everyone else. You know, we want a better Sudan. We want a better sense of community, and I feel like we will be able to get that. And we know that we're strong, and we know we can be united. You know, through the revolution, we know that we can come together and be one whole. And you know, I'm just hoping for one day, you know, a better education system, better healthcare system, better social care system, everything. I just, you know, I'm really hoping, I know for a fact that in the years to come, we will see Sudan as a developed country and a much better country, and hopefully a democratic government.
Thank you. And for me, I want to see true democracy in Sudan. I don't think elections necessarily equates to true democracy. I want to see the people in charge and the army to defend Sudan, but not govern Sudan. I'd like to see Hemeti and Burhan no longer calling the shots. I want to see the political opposition holding a democratic government to account. But most importantly, Sudan is a huge country with young potential, so many young people. I think 60% of the country are under the age of 30. We have huge capacity. The only thing that's stopping us is us. And I think when we come together, once we stop caring about tribal, religious, and ethnic differences, we have the potential to be a real powerhouse in the future. And I think in this discussion, we saw what the diaspora can offer, and some of the brilliant minds that are living in the diaspora, willing and able to help Sudan. And there are many more brilliant minds back home in Sudan. And if we work together as a diaspora and the Sudanese community in the mainland, then who knows what we can achieve. Now, to wrap up, we've got a video from an Irish activist, Kiefer, who's a huge supporter of the Sudanese movement. We're going to play that. And if anyone has any comments, please leave them below. And we will continue this discussion once everyone's gone off air. But I'd like to thank all of our guests. And I'd like to thank the Sudanese Communist Party for inviting me to be part of this discussion. And hopefully it's one of many more discussions to be had in the future. Shukran.
Thank you everyone for your attention, and thank you to the people who watched and put in their comments and their thoughts as well.
حرية سلام وعدالة مدنية خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة والثورة خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة مدنية خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة والثورة خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة مدنية خيار الشعب.
When I was watching from Ireland, my first instinct was I just wanted to find or hop on the earliest plane home so that I could join into the revolution with my people and be a part of their fight for freedom and for peace and for a civilian government. It was almost like a beacon. Women have come together to stand at the front of marches, to speak out. We have the symbol of the kandakat, Sudanese women in the white robe standing on top of a car, and almost orchestrating an entire group of protesters. I feel like that's just a small symbol of the power that the women held in this revolution.
The sit-in in Khartoum, for me, resembled a small version of the Sudan everyone hopes for. It was a small version of the Sudan where everyone is welcome, where regardless of your class, your age, your gender, your religion, you were welcome to participate and you were cared for and looked after. It created a space of hope, a space where people gathered together, recharged from everything happening in the country. The energy was something else that no one could experience unless you were in the Sudan.
We are the exact same as you. It doesn't matter if we're Muslim, if we're black, if we're African. It doesn't matter what we are. We have the same value as you, and we have the same rights as you. And it would really mean a lot to us if you supported us, which you are doing. But if you, because at the beginning, people didn't really realize it as a huge issue. But when we all work together, we can achieve what we need.
The Sudanese revolution, in my opinion, is not only for Sudan. It's a hope for everyone fighting for freedom in Sudan and outside of Sudan. And that's why everyone who believes in freedom needs to fight with the Sudanese.
رسالتنا لكل العالم إنه الشعب السوداني حدد مصيره بحلمه بسودان أفضل، سودان بكرة الحيكون مبني على مبدأ حرية، سلام وعدالة.
Do you want to say something, Fatima? Yeah, say it. Say something for people back there in Sudan, our family, to Haboba, to your grandmother and grandfather. What do you want to say?
I want Sudan to be free and I wish I could see my family again in peace and not getting killed.
حرية سلام وعدالة، الثورة خيار الشعب. حرية سلام وعدالة، مدنية قرار الشعب. Freedom, peace and justice for Sudan. Freedom, peace and justice for Sudan.
Okay, very powerful video to end this discussion with. Very powerful video to end this discussion with, and you can see just how passionate those people in the video were, young and old. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and for those that contributed. And Sudan, our unity is our strength. The unity between those in the diaspora and back home, that's what will bring freedom, peace, and justice to Sudan. So I just want to leave you with that message. And once again, thank you. Jazakallah and goodbye.